We, of course, have been talking about the upcoming presidential election, but we've also been talking about possible changes in control of the House and Senate. We haven't spent that much time on governor's races, and I want to do that now. Joining me is Gregg, who is the Democratic Party nominee for governor of Indiana, running against Republican Mike Pence. Now, it's great to have you here, John. I want to start with one thing which caught my attention, which is that while you consider yourself pro-life, you do support funding Planned Parenthood. So let's get into that a little bit. What is your position on abortion?
Well, I am a pro-life Democrat, and the years that I was in the legislature, that was my position. It still is my position. But you know, David, people can apply common sense. They can look at the facts, and the facts are federal dollars that go to Planned Parenthood or state dollars that go to Planned Parenthood only go for family planning, birth control, cervical exams, which are cancer screening, and pap test. And how can you be against that? I mean, that's women's access to health care. You know, abortions are not done with federal tax dollars or state tax dollars. So you can be pro-life and still support Planned Parenthood.
The other thing, that's just fact, and we talked about that on this program. It seemed to be missing from much of the national discussion around the war on women and the Planned Parenthood scandal from a few months back. The other thing, though, is I'm curious, as a pro-life Democrat, do you believe what some on the right believe, which is that many on the left who support abortions being safe and legal actually want to have more abortions? Or do you think that's just kind of one of those straw men that doesn't really exist?
You know, the whole time I was speaker, because Indiana, the Democrats in Indiana run a pretty broad spectrum from liberal to conservative. And I can tell you as speaker, same as when I'm governor, we tried to concentrate on issues that brought us together. And most people in Indiana are concerned about jobs. My opponent has made a whole 12-year career out of defunding Planned Parenthood.
But let me stop you there, though, because I like to shoot straight here, and I'm recognizing what you're doing now as the tangential response and pivot to something else. My question was very, very specific. Some are accused of, by supporting the right to have an abortion, wanting to see more abortions. Like, for example, I believe abortions should be safe and legal to access. I would prefer there be none. However, I still agree that they should be available. Do you really think that there's some on the left who want more abortions?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, good. Excellent. That's exactly the answer I was hoping for. Let's talk a little bit about this race with Mike Pence here. You talked about jobs, and we're seeing so much now being thrown about, particularly starting with the presidential race, about who is better for creating jobs, and it's coming down to President Obama and Mitt Romney, but then it filters down to state policy and Republicans versus Democrats. President Clinton presented some interesting numbers in his DNC speech about historically which White House party is better at creating jobs. What specifically for Indiana do you propose that will create jobs?
We propose concentrating our efforts in 5 areas that we have great opportunities. We're an agricultural state. We talk about the opportunities we have in agriculture, from urban, from green, to large greenhouses, to we also talk about the opportunities of research and development. We talk about the opportunities in manufacturing, specifically what we call advanced manufacturing through our steel and our automotive industries. But also we have a lot of high tech and laser optics, robotics production, improving those, taking advantage of our location. Our third area is logistics. Our fourth area is life sciences. A lot of people may not know this, but Indiana is between third and fourth in the number of people employed in life sciences. And the fifth item we have is energy. We are a mining state. We also have methane, natural gas. Because of ag, we have got the potential for biofuels and all kinds of production related to ag all across the state. And we're also a wind producer in the northern part of the state.
Is wind a tough thing to start really developing? I mean, here where we are in Massachusetts, you can drive around in different parts and actually see the wind farms. And of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the not in my own backyard type of mentality that often takes place with that. Is wind, what can really be done with wind in Indiana?
Well, we've got wind farms in the Northwest. and we've got some going up in the Northeast. I'll tell you where it's great. It's how we get people back to work in Indiana. It's not only a reality, but there are aluminum blades, and these aluminum blades ought to be made in Indiana. And that pole that holds it up ain't no Georgia pine. It's a piece of steel, and that steel ought to be made in Indiana. And the wire needs to come out of the old Essex plant in Fort Wayne, and the hub on that needs to be cast at a foundry in LaPorte. But what most people don't know, David, in the case of Indiana, 85% plus of those wind turbines are shipped here from Western Europe. That's ridiculous. We need to be making them here in the United States, and we want to make them in Indiana. So it not only helps with an alternate fuel and helps with our energy independence, it can put Hoosiers to work.
One area where I can only imagine you strongly disagree with your opponent in is that of healthcare, and that really ties into jobs pretty significantly. I'm curious, being in Massachusetts myself, we actually now have this healthcare program that Mitt Romney put into place, which was then strengthened by our current governor, Deval Patrick. Do you have the idea of creating some kind of a safety net, some kind of an expanded Medicaid type program in Indiana if you're a governor? I mean, what are your thoughts along those lines?
Well, we have in Indiana our current governor who cannot seek re-election, who's very popular, who's of the opposite party. He has what he calls a CHIP program, and we can take that program and want to use that as a basis. And in order to comply with, of course, the current federal law, the Affordable Health Care Act, the only thing we would need to apply to just have the essential health benefits, the EHP, would be maternity coverage. So we've got a pretty good thing in Indiana, but we have neglected, when you talk about a safety net, we've got some problems here in Indiana. They tried to privatize what we call our Family and Social Services Agency, which is the old state welfare department. They sent $200 million back from what we call our Department of Children's Services. And we've done some things that we've got to work at getting that safety net when it comes to the care and the oversight of children that in homes that maybe aren't like mine and yours growing up, that, are in danger, that can be abused, that are being harmed, and sometimes even worse. So we've got those challenges, but we're prepared to meet them, and we have a plan to meet them.
Would you support pushing a state-based single-payer type system like what the governor in Vermont is doing?
Well, I think the thought in Indiana is that since we've had the Affordable Health Care Act passed, and since that is the law, that's what we'll be doing in Indiana. My lieutenant governor and I have said since that's the law, we've met with our current governor, who met with all three of the candidates, and he briefed us on it, and we talked a little bit about options. We have to make a decision by mid-November. We won't be in office, but he has sought our input as to whether or not the state of Indiana in the insurance pool, which is what's required in the Affordable Health Care Act, whether we would just have an Indiana pool, whether we'd have a regional pool, whether we'd have a hybrid pool between federal and state, or just go in the federal pool. And based on the information we have provided to us by the governor and under our current understanding of the law, we would be looking at going at a hybrid where the federal government would help pay for 80% of the setup and startup of that program, and then we in Indiana though would get to run it, and we could tailor it.
So I'm hearing, no, you wouldn't be interested in going even further and trying to do state-based single-payer like Vermont?
No, I don't think we will need to do that, in part because of the Affordable Health Care Act, but there's been no movement to do that in Indiana.
All right, John Gregg, Democratic Party nominee for governor of Indiana, state rep in Indiana from 1986 to 2002, also Speaker of the House there, 1996 to 2002. Really a pleasure speaking with you today, and best of luck in the campaign.
Well, thank you. And I always like to point out I'm a former university president and would like to invite your listeners to check us out at greggforgovernor.com.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a break and stay tuned. Plenty more coming up after this.